Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good to see you.
Hi,
Thank you for
Yashaswini. How are you?
organizing this on a Saturday afternoon.
Thanks for everyone to join us. I hope everyone is doing well on the weekend. So, without further delay, let me introduce all of us. So, hi, I am Ayushi. I am the Vice President at OHOQ Foundation. And so sorry for wearing these glasses
I
today. I have
hope
some
you're
eye
fine. I
infection,
hope
so
it's
I
not
thought
too
of
bad
wearing.
though.
All right, so
Oh.
not too bad.
But take
We
care.
just don't want everyone else to get it. Yeah, thanks. So, people, today's live is very interesting and very important in terms of knowing a lot of things which we people might miss on day-to-day basis. So, let me first introduce Nyaya. Nyaya is an open access digital resource that provides simple, actionable, reliable, and accessible legal information. It's called SARL in multiple formats, be it audio, visual, or even in written formats to help solve citizens' day-to-day legal problems and make them aware of their rights. It's conceived by Rohini Nilekani. Nyaya is incubated at Vithi Center for Legal Policy. And today we have with us Yashaswini, who is their outreach lead. So thanks so much, Yashaswini, for joining us today. And I hope everyone will learn a lot of things. They will get to know about a lot of things which is required in day-to-day life about the rights and policies for the transgender community. So, Yashaswini, I would like to start with a question. What is the
So,
definition of
hi, first
transgender
and
according to
foremost,
the law?
thank you so much, official Humans of Queer and Ayushi for organizing this. And I think we at Nyaya are always very excited to talk about rights of the LGBTQ plus persons and just talking about, how law is, I mean, it's still a work in progress, but it is by and large becoming inclusive, and yet there is a long way to go ahead for all of us. So getting an opportunity to talk about talk about the rights, queer rights, and talk about how law in India currently perceives an LGBTQ plus person and a citizen is indeed really also enlightening for us. And what I'm hoping is, while we discuss, I don't know if did I get stuck? Can you hear me though?
Yeah, I think I can hear you, but
Let me see
video is
now.
stuck. But all right, I mean,
Okay,
we can
great.
hear you though.
All right. No, so as I
Yeah,
was saying, apologies for that. Technology has not always been my good friend. But what I wanted to say is that, yeah, I'm hoping that as we talk about some of the laws that exist and the legal positions that's prevalent in India right now, I'd love to hear from you and everyone who's watching today and who's joined us today to sort of understand and learn, so that together we can also create content which would be more relevant. And as you rightly said, our focus is to create simple and actionable information, legal information, so that all of us are aware of our legal rights, and at the same time we are unafraid to claim and enforce it. So that is basically what I am looking forward to from today's session. Now, going back to your question about what is the legal definition or status of a transgender person in India. So, in India, legally, transgender persons or anyone who identifies themselves as a transgender person is referred to as a third gender or the other gender. Now, in terms of the rights and how they are recognized by the law, the rights are as same, the status is the same as any other male or female person in India. So there is no difference in terms of any citizen rights that's accorded to a transgender person in terms of the fundamental rights. Of course, there are reservations which I'm sure we will come to later on. But in terms of recognition and status, that is the same as any other citizen. And you may have noticed increasingly in government forms, etc., there is an option to sort of select third gender or other gender as an option whenever any form requires to specify your gender other than male or female. So this actually we have to think of, attribute this I want to say this step to a landmark judgment by the Supreme Court of India, in which came out in 2014, which is very commonly known as Nalsa judgment. This was by the case name was Nalsa versus Union of India, and this was when the courts officially declared transgender as the third gender. And this as a part, the court went on to say that henceforth, the transgender persons would also be fully entitled to all fundamental rights that is guaranteed to any other citizens of India. This includes Article 14, which guarantees equality before law, Article 15, which sort of enshrines prohibition of any form of discrimination. Now, going from our lived experience, we know that this is very important. Then there is equal opportunity in public employment. We will discuss more about, and of course, right to freedom of speech and expression. So all the constitutional laws that any citizen of India enjoys, a third gender or an other gendered person, a transgender person, will also enjoy these in an equal footing. And in 2020, the Parliament legally recognized transgender as an official gender in India. So that is currently the legal status of a transgender person in India.
Well, thanks so much, Yashaswini, for clarifying that. I hope everyone got to know a lot about the legal status in the country. So next question we have is,
Absolutely.
does the law permit a person to choose
the
their
law
gender
grants
identity?
everyone the right to choose one's gender identity, but I would just spend 2 minutes to sort of talk about one fundamental thing about our perception of what gender and sex is. And Ayushi, please, I would request you to also chip in if you think that I'm missing out any point here, because you also would be in a great position to contribute to this conversation as well. Basically, I think that this is important to talk about before we go into the law, because often we use these terms interchangeably: gender identity, gender, sex, and sometimes that causes confusion. But in the eyes of law, there is a clear-cut distinction. So often, biologically, the sex is basically the biologically what is assigned to us at birth. But gender has to do with what our identity is, what we as individuals feel we are. But that doesn't again relate to any of our physical attributes or characteristics, or how we carry ourselves, any of our idiosyncrasies, if I may use the term. So when we talk about changing our gender identity, it often has to do with how one identifies oneself. So basically, in terms of in the eyes of law, you can 100% change. You have the right to choose your own gender identity, and there is, it is basically and the law also recognized that there is a legal recognition of the third gender, other gender, and however a person wishes to identify oneself, they can do that. Now again, I'll go back to the Nalsa judgment, which is basically the National Legal Service Authority versus Union of India 2014 judgment. Here the Supreme Court asked the central and the government to formulate, regulate social welfare schemes and other necessary provisions, which is important, which is required to facilitate this sort of changing one's gender. And you can do it either medically, you have the right to self-identify also. Even if I don't undergo any medical procedure, but I want to officially change my identity or the gender or sex assigned to me at birth to something else that I identify with, I have the right, I have the sole right to do so. There is a set procedure, and this judgment instructed all government authorities to ensure that there's a social environment which is not hostile but which enables this sort of a change. And I would also like to, refer to this particular judgment by the Bombay High Court. This is a 2021 judgment. This was in the case of Anjali Guru Sanjana Jan versus State of Maharashtra and others. So here, the facts of the case was the village, in the contest, the petitioner was a contestant in the village panchayat elections, and the petitioner identified themselves as a female, while she was a transgender, and her application was rejected on that ground, that why did she not select third or other gender. However, that the court held that the petitioner has the right to self-identify, and whichever, even if a person is transgender, has chosen transgender or other gender at any other point in their life, they can opt to choose any other gender they identify in any situation. So in this case, the Bombay High Court actually overturned the panchayat, the election commission's, the local election commission's, rejection, and accepted her accepted her application. So here, basically, one can change, and we will go into talking about how this change can take place, or how one can do it. But overall, it can be done legally, it can be done medically, it can just be done by a self-assertion also, because our laws allow us to self-identify.
Thanks so much for clarifying that, Yashaswini, because I think it's important to first know about the gender identity. And it's good to have some examples like you told us about the case in the Maharashtra High Court, because especially for validating our own thoughts to whether or not choose what the gender, whenever we are filling any application or anywhere we are applying to choose the gender, we identify it. It's very important to have certain cases to validate that thought. So thank you so much for sharing that. You all can also write your questions in the chat box. Meanwhile, you can write in the comments if you have any questions, and we will also take your questions. So, Yashaswini, another question for me. Provisions for gender reaffirmation surgeries.
Yes,
Are
Ayushi.
you
I
able
think there
to
was
hear
a
me?
short lag, but I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think
Right.
basically, what are
So
the provisions for
again,
gender
this follows up.
reaffirmation
Actually, I'm glad
surgeries?
you brought that question up, because this follows from our previous discussion. Basically, gender reaffirmation surgery specific is just one form of changing or your identity, gender identity. Medically, it is basically when you change or change your identity to or express your gender identity differently. That is the term that is sort of officially and medically accepted is called transitioning. And there are different forms of transitioning that you can undergo. As you rightly said, gender affirmative therapy or surgery is of course one way to do it. Now there are we are not a medical expert, so there might be, we're not going to probably be able to tell you accurately the whole medical procedure, but the in terms of the official procedure, what is recognized by law, etc., I'm going to sort of run you through it. So there are a set of medical procedures. This doesn't mean that you'll have to go under the knife always. If you want to get into GAT, it ranges from psychosocial counseling to sex reassignment surgeries. And here, I would also request you, Ayushi, and anyone who is, better versed with this, if there is any term that I'm not using correctly, please do let me know, because appropriate term and being sensitive is something that we always want to get at, and it's always good to learn and update ourselves. So please let me know if there is any other term that I should be using when referring to any of these procedures. I'll be happy to incorporate. So going forward, coming back to the question, that yes, there are series of psychosocial counseling, and then there are sex reassignment surgeries, which again, um, through different sort of medical procedures, surgically, hormone therapies, etc., change a person's sometimes change a person's genitalia, sometimes change a person's physical appearance also. And the idea is to conform more strongly to one's self-identified gender. So this sort of often sort of involves, sometimes involves, some very common forms can be breast removal surgeries or insertion surgeries. There are various sort of medical procedures also available, but mostly what happens is one has to go through a whole series of treatment, which involves counseling, medication, and of course surgery in some cases. But there's also something called as a hormone therapy. Now, this is basically a person sort of has to ingest some sort of hormones, again administered. Please, I would want to emphasize that no one should do these or decide to undergo these treatment through self medication or just by googling. One must be under very strict medical supervision, take expert opinion, and only subject oneself to these treatments, because it does have serious health implications. So then that aside, there are things called intersex surgery, where you again undergo medical procedure to undergo your sexual characteristics and genitalia. Sometimes certain people are born with anomalous genitals. So then there is no clear distinction. So often there are medical treatment to sort of synergize that also. However, I want to say that often, given that unfortunately, even in today's day and age, there's a lot of stigma and taboo around transgender persons. Often one is forced to undergo what is known as corrective surgery, which is often against one's wishes. So there are strict prohibitions on that given according to the law as well. So consent here is the key. And again, I'd like to re-emphasize on the fact that one has to be very, very mindful about what is the correct line of treatment. So please, if you are thinking or considering any of these procedures, please consult a doctor or medical person first, and then take a decision. So that is one. These are some of the overall, and again, the disclaimer that it's not an exhaustive list. A medical person would be in a better position to comment. But these are the procedures which are recognized by the law also. So these are all very legal. One last point I'd like to make is that it is not mandatory for a person to undergo any medical procedure or a physical procedure to change or choose their gender identity. I may perfectly have or retain my body at birth or my physical attributes at birth, but change my gender identity. And the person, a law the law of the land recognizes the right to do so. So, however I look, however I behave, does not affect my gender identity or does not give anyone a reason to presume my gender identity. So, I think it's a good, now a lot of people, add their pronouns or just check in with someone's pronouns before referring to them. I think that's a great practice we can sort of imbibe. So, yeah, that's more or less, the processes.
Absolutely, and very important point about the pronouns. I think to bring in the equity, these kind of small steps by everyone in everyday life are very important, because while having conversations, if you are introducing yourself with your own pronoun, I think it somehow makes the other person also comfortable to use their own pronouns. So I think using pronouns in day-to-day life, that is very important. One of the most easiest step one can take to bring in all the equity in the world. So definitely that is something I always emphasize on, because these are kind of steps which we ourselves can take in day-to-day life, which are very important. So Yashaswini, we talked about the legal status of transgender people in India, and then we also talked about what is the definition according to the constitution, and how gender identity is recognized by the law, and we can choose our gender identity as what we identify as. And the law also has provisions for surgeries as well, procedures as well, medical procedures. So now I would like to know more about, how does the
100%.
Indian Constitution
And
protect
I'm
a
really glad that
transgender
you
person?
brought that up because it's good that we are now talking in the light of some of the landmark judgments which have actually strengthened the rights of transgender persons. But if we go back to the original design or the draft of the Indian Constitution, we'll see that there are rights which protect transgender persons even then. It's good that our justice system is reinforcing these rights and we are getting more aware. But I'm glad that you are enabling us to go back to or reflect back on the Indian Constitution. So we actually know that these are rights which always was guaranteed to everyone, every citizen, irrespective of their gender, their sexual orientation, anything. So at the very beginning, we can talk about Article 14, which is the right to equality before law. And here, when we talk about a transgender person under this right cannot be subjected to any unfair treatment, either in educational institute or at the time of employment or in terms of representation before the court. So it's a gender, here the Constitution has always uses a gender neutral term. So it says that no one can deny any person or any chance to equality before law, and every person is entitled to equal protection by the law. So if our rights are violated, we can go to the court, we can approach the legal authorities for protection. There is no gender bias or discrimination here. And even the use of public property or any of the other fundamental rights that the Constitution guarantees, a transgender person has an equal right to enjoy them. And that's Article 14. Then the article right after is Article 15, which prohibits any form of discrimination. And we know that unfortunately this is a reality. Although the Constitution says that on basis of race, religion, caste, or sex, you cannot discriminate against, again, any person, so gender neutral term. But this ill treatment of a transgender person for in any case, in any situation is actually, although it happens, it is prohibited by law. One case I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about some of the cases that happened that sort of reinforces the need for protection or prohibition of discrimination. One is MX Alia SK versus the state of West Bengal. This is also a fairly recent case of 2019, where a transgender person was denied admission into a university, and this re-emphasized that every person has the right to seek admission into the university. And it is important because there are certain special accommodations and adjustments which are made to sort of are made in public institutions like universities. Most of universities in India are also government institutions, or at least they are regulated by one central government authority, right? Even the private universities. So any public university or public institutional application has to reasonably accommodate any application by a transgender person. So just on basis of one's gender identity, admission or application cannot be denied. So this is just one example of how the prohibition or Article 15 applies to a transgender person. Then freedom of speech and expression guaranteed under Article 19, which is basically the freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution. Here again, if any irrespective of your gender identity, you are entitled to express yourself freely. And every transgender person, as is any other citizen, entitled to a right to life and personal liberty under Article 21. So here it says that every individual, and again individual, not gender, it's a gender neutral term, has the right, including a transgender person, has the right to life and personal liberty. And this again, for this to sort of exemplify this, I would like to refer to this judgment by a 2014 judgment by the Madras High Court. This is by the Nangwai versus Superintendent of Police, which which sort of which was against the case. The facts of the case was that a person was forced to undergo very intrusive medical examination to determine one's gender, and did not it was a loss, it was humiliating, it was a loss of dignity, and of course it was a painful process. So this case, this high court again in this case recognized that a person has a right to self identify, and a person cannot be forced to undergo any medical condition. And we've seen in several sports related case also that often a person's identity is called to question for determining their eligibility to contest in one sort of one one category of sports or the other. So that is actually against the law, because the law repeatedly has recognized a person's self identity. So a person, if one identifies one gender and gets that certification, and that's it, many people sort of end up facing violence in the form of how they look, or their behavioral respect. That is not really what the constitution subscribes to, or any of the courts have sort of held against. And what is more important is, Ayushi, that besides the constitution, now we have actually an act which is dedicated only towards the protection of rights of transgender persons. So it was passed in 2019 and rules. So all the rules and the act in 2019. So 2020 onwards, there are 6 categories of what are the laws that actually protects transgender persons and how their rights cannot be violated. So all these, everything that we spoke of, are reinforced in this act also.
All right. I was not aware about how Constitution uses a lot of gender neutral terms in a lot of the articles, which is very important to understand, because a lot of times people don't know how to leverage these laws in their favor. So it's very important to understand that wherever the Constitution has used a gender neutral term, you can always leverage it. And you rightly mentioned there have been cases as well where people have put this forward and they have won those cases. So thank you so much for highlighting those cases as well, because I think it's important for people to understand what laws are, how constitution has used the gender neutral terms, and how they can leverage these laws for their own benefit. So thanks so much. And someone is saying that, ma'am, please speak in Hindi. So can you
श्योर
maybe,
श्योर
in 2 lines or
पहले
3 lines
तो एक
explain the
चीज है
same
कि मेरी
again?
हिंदी बहुत अच्छी नहीं है। मैं दरअसल बंगाल से हूँ, तो एवरी बंगाली हैज द वेरी टिपिकल हिंदी एक्सेंट, तो वो थोड़ा मजाक उड़ा सकती हूँ, लेकिन आपको अगर समझ में आ जाए तो वो काफी है। यस, थैंक
I'll
यू थैंक
help.
यू। तो
मेरी
बेसिकली
I'll
हम
help you.
अभी हमारा जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है, संविधान है, उसमें जो हमें अधिकार दिया जाता है, इसके बारे में हम थोड़ा बातचीत कर रहे थे कि आर्टिकल 14 जो है हमें सबको हमें इक्वालिटी देती है लॉ के सामने। तो यहाँ पे आप कोई भी हो, आप मेल हो या फीमेल हो या ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन हो, आप कोई भी कानूनी अधिकार आपका जो है वो हमारा कानून आपको प्रोटेक्ट करेगा। ऐसा कोई बात नहीं है कि आप थर्ड जेंडर या ट्रांसजेंडर जैसे आइडेंटिफाई करते हो इसीलिए आपको कोई डिस्क्रिमिनेट या फिर आपके खिलाफ कोई भेदभाव नहीं होगा। और हम एक और चीज बात कर रहे थे कि हमेशा ऐसा होता है कि आप कोई किसी स्पोर्ट्स में भाग लेना चाह रहे हो या फिर कोई भी स्कूल या पब्लिक इंस्टीट्यूशन में अगर आपको अपना एडमिशन करवाना हो, कभी कई दफा होता है कि यहाँ पे आप एडमिशन नहीं ले सकते, और ये एक्चुअली हर एक लेवल में होता है। स्कूल के बच्चों के साथ होता है, आप यूनिवर्सिटी स्टूडेंट्स के छात्रों के साथ होता है। तो हर स्थिति में हमारा ये मौलिक अधिकार है कि हम जहां हमें जाना है, हम चाहते हैं हम जा सकते हैं, और ये हमारा जो आर्टिकल 14 है ये हमें ये अधिकार देते हैं। और उसके बाद हमारे पास जो अधिकार है वो है भेदभाव के खिलाफ एक जो प्रोटेक्शन, ये आर्टिकल 15 हमें देते हैं। तो ये यहाँ पे होता है कि कोई भी किसी इंसान के साथ, भले वो ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन क्यों ना हो, उनके साथ बस इस वजह से कोई भेदभाव या फिर बुरी तरह बुरी तरह से कोई पेश नहीं आ सकता। और एक वेस्ट बंगाल के स्टेट ऑफ वेस्ट बंगाल MX आलिया SK वर्सेस स्टेट ऑफ वेस्ट बंगाल एक केस हुआ था। वहां पे एक छात्रा को एक यूनिवर्सिटी में एनरोल करने से मना कर दिया था, लेकिन कोर्ट ने ऐसे बोला कि उनका अधिकार है, तो आप ऐसे उनको रोक नहीं सकते। तो ऐसे कभी केसेस स्पोर्ट्स में भी हमने सुना होगा, कई दफा न्यूज़पेपर्स में आते रहते हैं कि स्पोर्ट्स एक कैटेगरी में उनको रोक दिया गया। तो ऐसे आरोप आप नहीं लगा सकते, क्योंकि हमारी कोर्ट हमको देते हैं कि आप कोई और आपका आपका जो जेंडर है वो कोई और डिटरमिन नहीं कर सकता। हाँ, आप भले एक मेडिकल और या फिर ऑफिशियल प्रोसेस की तरह आपके पास सर्टिफिकेट आपने बनवा लिया हो, और या फिर आपने मेडिकली ट्रीटमेंट आपने कर लिया हो, वो भी सही है। लेकिन अगर आपको खुद को आइडेंटिफाई करना चाहो, ये भी आप कर सकते हो, ये आपका कानूनी अधिकार है। और आपके पास ये भी है कि आपको आपके जो मन में आए आप वो कह सकते हो। अच्छा, इसमें मैं एक थोड़ा सा एक बात और जुड़ना चाहूंगी, क्योंकि ये जो आर्टिकल 19 है ये हमारा एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम नहीं है। क्योंकि हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ये कहता है कि आपको अधिकार है आपके मन की बात को बेझिझक बताने का, लेकिन आपको ये भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि ऐसा कुछ ना आप कह दे जिससे किसी और को कोई और की जिंदगी में दखल हो, या फिर किसी और को कोई चोट पहुंचे। तो वो थोड़ा सा और फिर या देश के कोई सिक्योरिटी के कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो, तो वो थोड़ा सा एक रिस्ट्रिक्शंस हो सकता है कुछ कुछ कंडीशन में। पर ये अधिकार हम सबको है, ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन को भी है। एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इज जो आर्टिकल 21 जो है वो हमें एक राइट टू लाइफ, मतलब हमें हमारी जिंदगी पे या फिर हमारी पर्सनल लिबर्टी, जो आयुषी व्हाट वुड बी अ बेटर टर्म, पर्सनल लिबर्टी मतलब रहने का, हमारे जीने का जो डिग्निटी है, तो उसके ऊपर कोई कोई ऐसे दखल अंदाजी नहीं कर सकते। और एक केस मैं बोल रही थी कि ये मद्रास हाई कोर्ट का केस था, जहाँ पे एक पुलिस के अरेस्ट के दौरान एक ट्रांसजेंडर व्यक्ति को जोर जबरदस्ती एक मेडिकल एग्जामिनेशन करना पड़ा था। पर वो अगेन कानून के खिलाफ है, क्योंकि जब आप सेल्फ आइडेंटिफाई करते हो दैट इज इनफ। इसके ज्यादा आपको कोई कोई और सबूत की किसी को पूछने का अधिकार नहीं है। तो कोई फोर्सफुली आपको कोई मेडिकल एग्जामिनेशन नहीं करवा सकता। लेकिन ये मान लीजिए आपका कोई स्पेसिफिक ट्रीटमेंट के लिए आप जा रहे हो जिसमें मेडिकल एग्जामिनेशन मेडिकली रिक्वायर्ड है, तब आपको कंप्लाई करना होगा। तो वो कुछ कुछ कंडीशन में है, लेकिन बस ऐसे ही आपको हैरेस करने के लिए कोई कुछ मांगे, ये कानून के खिलाफ है। और मैं ये भी बोल रही थी कि ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन तो है ही, हमारा संविधान तो हमें देता ही है ये ऑर्डर, पर इसके अलावा अभी हमारे पास एक कानून है जो स्पेसिफिकली ट्रांसजेंडर व्यक्तियों की प्रोटेक्शन के लिए, उनकी जो राइट्स है, उनकी जो अधिकार है, उनको उनके प्रोटेक्शन के लिए बना गया है। 2019 का एक कानून है जो कि 2020 से इंडिया में लागू है। तो इसमें भी ये जो जो बात हमने कहा है, इसमें बाकी बातचीत ऐसे ऐसे लगाया जाता है, इसमें ये कवर कर लेते हैं। तो आप ये भी एक्ट पढ़ सकते हो, और बाकी जो हमने आर्टिकल्स के बारे में बोला कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में, उसके बारे में भी पढ़ सकते हो। बट मोटा मोटा ये दोनों ही कानूनी हमारा क्या बोलते हैं प्रोविजंस है जो ट्रांसजेंडर व्यक्तियों का ख्याल रखते हैं, उनके अधिकारों का।
बहुत अच्छा यशस्विनी, आपकी हिंदी बहुत ही अच्छी है। लॉट ऑफ कमेंट्स पीपल सेइंग दैट बहुत अच्छे से समझाया, हमें तो ये सब पता ही नहीं था, इतना सब कुछ भी हमारे लिए है। सो थैंक यू सो मच यशस्विनी। एंड जस्ट टू समराइज दिस स्पेशली इन हिंदी, तो जैसे यशस्विनी बोल रहे थे कि बहुत सारे हमारे संविधान में ऐसे आर्टिकल्स हैं जो ट्रांसजेंडर कम्युनिटी के हित में है, क्योंकि उन आर्टिकल्स में जेंडर न्यूट्रल टर्म यूज किए गए हैं, ताकि जो भी उन आर्टिकल्स के साथ जो भी आपको अधिकार मिलते हैं वो सबको बराबर मिले, इरिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ आप किसी भी जेंडर से आइडेंटिफाई करते हो, वो आप सबके लिए बराबर हैं। और कोर्ट में ऐसे काफी सारे केसेस आ चुके हैं जिसके थ्रू आप वैलिडेट कर सकते हो, जिसके थ्रू आपको पता चल सकता है कि हाँ, इन अधिकारों का यूज करके, इन अधिकारों की वजह से काफी सारे लोगों को न्याय मिला है, based on वो जो भी अपने आप को जैसे भी जेंडर से आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं. So thank you so much, Yashaswini, for explaining it so well in Hindi as well. I think everyone understood it so well. What are all the articles, what are all the rights which are in favor of them, which they
सॉरी
can use, which
आयुषी,
they
आई
can
थिंक
leverage
एक
in their
क्वेश्चन
day-to-day
था जो
life.
आया
So
था कि
we
सेम सेक्स मैरिज के बारे में.
let me go back. Yeah, can
हाँ,
you tell us what is the status of
एक्चुअली
same-sex
दिस इज
marriage in
सब
India?
जुडिस. मतलब अभी भी कोर्ट में चल रहा है. बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट टॉपिक ये है. फिलहाल क्योंकि कोर्ट अभी इनकी सुनवाई चल रही है. अभी तक तो कोई नतीजा में पहुंचा नहीं है, लेकिन हम होप कर सकते हैं कि इन द स्पिरिट ऑफ लॉ जो है इक्वालिटी और प्रोहिबिशन ऑफ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, इन सब चीजों पे, इन सारे मुद्दों को ऐसे इसके थिंकिंग अबाउट दीज थिंग्स, फोकसिंग अबाउट हाउ द वैल्यूज दैट दीज राइट्स प्रोटेक्ट, we hope that we will get a progressive and a favorable judgment soon. बट अभी तो कोई भी फिलहाल एक्चुअली इन इंडिया, ये एक्चुअली मैं थोड़ा सा, आयुषी आई नो ये हमारे क्वेश्चंस के थोड़ा सा डिटोर होता है, लेकिन मैं थोड़ा सा अभी बोल देना चाहूंगी क्योंकि इसमें हो रहा है बहुत सारे बात. इन इंडिया बेसिकली मैरिज जो चीज है ये हमारे पर्सनल लॉज के अंदर आता है. पर्सनल लॉज कहा जाए तो देर इज द these are all dependent on what one's personal religion is. So we have the Hindu Marriage Act, we have some of the laws under the Islamic acts, Islamic laws. There is no act, but there are laws, and there is a law, and of course there are Christian marriages acts also. There is one law which is for all religion. तो आप जो भी religion से belong करते हो, आपको अगर रिलीजियस तरीके से शादी नहीं करना है या फिर दोनों अलग धर्म के लोगों को अगर शादी करना है, तो एक एक्ट है स्पेशल मैरिज एक्ट. तो अनफॉर्चुनेटली ये है कि ऑल दीज एक्ट्स, जो भी हिंदू मैरिज एक्ट हो गया, स्पेशल मैरिज एक्ट हो गया, इस्लामिक क्रिश्चियन जो भी हो गया, इन सारे एक्ट्स में बहुत क्लियर तरीके से ब्राइड ग्रूम, मेल फीमेल, गर्ल बॉय, ये बहुत जेंडर बाइनरी जो टर्म्स है, ऐसे टर्म्स यूज किया जाता है. और ये टर्म्स बस डेफिनेशन में ही नहीं रुक जाता है. दीज गो ऑन टू डिफाइन योर राइट्स एंड योर रोल. बिकॉज ऑफ दिस रीजन कंफ्यूजन हो सकता है कि अगर हम सेम सेक्स से बिलोंग करते हैं तो who will be the bride, who will be the groom, and ये इस वजह से कोई एक्सप्लिसिट ऐसे क्लैरिटी नहीं मिला है कि सेम सेक्स मैरिज इंडिया में लीगल है कि नहीं है. तो अभी जो केसेस चल रहा है यहाँ पे कोर्ट सुन रहा है कि कोर्ट एक्सप्लिसिटली ऐसे सामने से आके हमें बता देगा कि नहीं ये भी रिकग्नाइज्ड है. देखा जाए तो अभी भी कहीं बोला नहीं गया कि नहीं आप नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन जो भी कानून है शादी के बारे में, जो भी कानून है दैट डिटरमिन्स योर राइट्स अंडर मैरिज, and marriage is not just about the ceremonies, right? It's also about your rights to say property, your rights as the nominee of your spouse. So all these allied rights come only once that official certification comes in. But अभी देश बदल रहा है, लोग के सोच, वी आर होपिंग भी बदल रहे हैं. सो आई थिंक अभी ये सब सवाल आ रहे हैं कि ये सारे सवाल आ रहे हैं कि अभी हमें कोर्ट सामने से आके बता दे कि ये अलाउड है कि नहीं. वरना पहले जो शादी के बारे में जो रूल्स थे ये बहुत जेंडर बाइनरी टर्म्स यूज करते थे पहले. दैट्स व्हाई देयर वाज नो क्लैरिटी. सो right now the question of marriage is sub judice or still a question of law, lekin hopefully we will get some clarity soon. Hopefully, yes. Yes.
Hopefully, very soon. And you mentioned that we are moving towards progress, especially progress in people's thinking, so which is very important. And hopefully, we're gonna get something in very soon. So, coming back to the topic which we were discussing about transgender people India. So we discussed about the legal status and the procedures, the provisions, and the protection which is given to transgender people under Constitution. So next would be, are there
Yes,
any
yes.
reservations for
So,
transgender people
under
according to law?
the act that I mentioned, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights, that was the 2019 Act, and in 2020 the rules, basically rules होता है कि once you pass an act, how to enforce the rules or how to enforce the provisions under these act, these rules are formulated. So procedurally आपको पता चले कि अच्छा ऐसे implement करना है. तो ये 2020 rules में Parliament has adopted these rules where the central and state governments have been uh, have been given the right to classify a transgender person under the other backward classes for any vertical reservation. So, be it in educational institute, be it at public services or koi jobs related to government services, there any OBC category जहाँ पे भी available है, you can apply for reservation under the other backward classes. Now, one thing is that how much or the percentage varies from state to state. State governments can decide how much they will grant any section of people or any section of citizens under the overall category of an OBC or other backward class. So that for that, I think it would be good to refer to some of the state, and all these states do come up with lists. So it would be good to refer to some of the government websites to check out कि आपकी state में what is the percentage और आपकी particular institution में क्या reservations है. That aside, I can share Ayushi some of the links of the articles or the explainers जो सरल तरीके से हम भी बनाए हैं न्याया में, वो हिंदी और इंग्लिश और कन्नड़ा में भी है. तो उसमें हम लिंक कर दिए हैं कुछ, एंड अगेन दिस कीप चेंजिंग, सो एग्जॉस्टिव तो नहीं है लेकिन आपको ओवरऑल आइडिया पता चल जाएगा कि किस स्टेट में कितना परसेंटेज है. एंड दिस इज एप्लीकेबल टू ऑल इंस्टीट्यूशंस व्हिच कम अंडर द जुरिसडिक्शन ऑफ द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट एंड द स्टेट गवर्नमेंट.
So basically what you said कि जितने भी state government और central government के अंदर institutes हैं या basically states के कोई भी positions हैं, so हर state का हर institute का अपना कुछ percentage रहता है
Yes.
for as a reservation for the transgender people. So is there any provision which states this the
OBC as
same
a
for
category
private institutes
is
as well?
sort of, it is relevant to all institutions, but like I said, the enforceability is different. So इसमें basically any institution which has the OBC reservation, the mandate remains the same for any person or any transgender person because now they are subsumed or they are included under the OBC category. But basically, which institution or enforceability part, matlab which institution will apply what percentage or in what way, that may differ. Or private institutions do have certain degree of autonomy in terms of their admissions definitions and all. But here again, we can link it back to the discriminatory or equality article. So if this is done in a discriminatory way, then that is a violation of their right. So maybe what I will do as a follow-up, and since we will be having these conversations more regularly now, I will send some specific links जो you can also share amongst your network and some of our audience, which actually deals with this in some greater detail. So I'll share those.
Yeah, thanks. I think that will be very helpful, and somehow it all comes back to what all acts we have, what all articles we have, and what kind of protection the transgender people have through the Constitution. So it's very important to understand that, and we have been talking about that since the beginning of this live, that what is the Constitution for transgender people, how does it help, and how they can leverage it. So based on that, I just wanted to ask you so that people can also understand based on different cases that have been there in the country, that
Sure. And
what
I
can be
think that's a
done
very
if
important
transgender
question
rights are
because
violated.
this happens. It's a reality. अभी भी जितना भी law, चाहे कितना law लागू हो, ये होता रहता है. So at least हम अगर जागरूक रहते कि these are our rights and this is where we can seek help, maybe we can reduce such, or at least we'll know where to go in case of a incident of discrimination. तो एक तो है कि under that act that I keep referring back to, which is the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, under this एक national authority or national body बनाया गया है, that is called the National Council for Transgender Persons. This is the that is the authority for registering or addressing any grievance or any complaints one may have as a transgender person. So if you are facing discrimination, if you have been harassed, if any of your rights that we have discussed that has been violated, एक चीज आयुषी हम बात नहीं किए थे कि in even under in terms of self-identification, there is now under this act, it gives us a right to get a certification. So for that, once you get that certificate of third gender or other gender, you have to just I mean, and how do you get it? There is a detailed explainer that we have. I will share that link as well. So usme it gives you the whole entire process. But overall, what you have to do is apply to the district magistrate, and the district magistrate issues it. That's the overall thing. But sometimes one faces discrimination and violation there also. That you don't look like one. You don't look like a transgender person. So there are several insensitive while in discriminatory comments passed. So even in those cases, the authority to go to is the National Council for Transgender Person, and every police station, every state should have the numbers and contact addresses of the National Council for Transgender Person displayed. And अगर आप नहीं जा पा रहे हो transgender council के पास for any reason, you always have the option to approach your nearest court. So either the Supreme Court or High Court under Article 32 and Article 226 respectively of the Indian Constitution, जहाँ पे any of your fundamental rights जो हमने अभी डिस्कस किया था, Article 14, 15, anything, any of these, if they are violated, then it becomes a case of a human rights abuse. So you can immediately go to the Supreme Court and file for you can file for sort of constitutional remedies that I have been violated. Please give out the right judgment to sort of reinforce my rights. So besides the National Council for Transgender Person, you can approach the court. And यहाँ पे how to file a complaint. Basically, there is the www.transgender.dosje.gov.in. That is the website. So online also you can file a complaint. But again, as I said, you can actually approach your local police station and file a complaint under the provisions which can be directly sort of routed to the National Transgender Council. And basically you can, if you basically either approach the court directly, or you can approach the NCTP, the Transgender Council. And here the other thing that you can do is basically, if you're not able to approach the council or the court directly, you can also go to your district legal aid service authority. Okay, here you are going to sort of again, if you have a specific basically they provide free legal aid, but again that's determined by your income ceiling. Okay, no, so specific income आपको proof दिखाना होगा, but that aside, if you think that you want the legal aid's help to approach the court, you can do so. But I would say that the NCTP was formed only and only for this purpose, so please don't be afraid or hesitate to reach out to them. And Ayushi, I'll also send these links to you. So maybe when we put these up as a post in the caption, we can sort of, link up these links.
Yeah, absolutely. We can figure out a way to send these links to the broader audience. Definitely, it will be very beneficial for all of them. And I think we are getting so many comments about how to deal with it, especially in school and anywhere in life. So if we talk about what Yashaswini said, जैसा उन्होंने बताया कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के अकॉर्डिंग जो भी हमारे अधिकार हैं, जो भी हमारे लॉ हैं, एक्ट्स हैं, वो सारे जेंडर न्यूट्रल ग्राउंड्स पर हैं. तो हम उन सारे लॉज का, कोई भी अगर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हो रहा है हमारे अगेंस्ट, किसी भी ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन के अगेंस्ट कोई भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हो रहा है, तो आप उन को यूज कर सकते हो, बिकॉज लीगली ये डिस्क्रिमिनेशन इज नॉट अलाउड इन द कंट्री. सो इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट टू कीप इन माइंड कि आपके पास ये सारे लॉज हैं टू प्रोटेक्ट योरसेल्फ अगर ऐसा कोई भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन आपके अगेंस्ट होता है तो. सो थैंक्स सो मच यश for clarifying all the things, for giving us so many examples to validate if something happens or is happening, how can one actually go ahead and rectify the situation, can leverage the constitution, can take help or seek help in terms of laws and acts. So thank you so much for sharing that. So would you like to share some cases which are very important? I know you shared some like the Madras High Court one, the Maharashtra High Court one, but if there are certain cases which are on top of your mind, which you think would be very important to share, people can learn from them, or maybe can validate their
Absolutely,
own
and
thoughts if some
I can
discrimination
sort
is
of, I
happening
know in
again.
the interest of time, I will briefly sort of touch upon three very important laws, important judgments. But before that, quickly, I think we have one question about CBSE schools in a state. So basically, even in private schools, access to admission is mandated by under not just by our Indian Constitution, but also the Right to Education Act. So even there, any admission under the law or according to the law cannot be denied on grounds of your gender identity. So please feel free to reach out to the National Transgender Persons Council if you see any discrimination is taking place, and register your grievance. Or if I know approaching the court can be a big step, but just again re-emphasizing that there is a provision you can approach, and you can take help from your district legal aid authority also to avail of free legal support. So you can file a case if any child is denied admission simply because they identify as a transgender person, irrespective whether it's a private school or a public school. Just actually going back to the question of some of the landmark judgments, one judgment that we should all remember whenever we are talking about the rights of transgender person is the NALSA judgment, which is the National Legal Services Authority versus Union of India judgment. This came out in 2014, and this was the first judgment which highlighted that the transgender community will be recognized as the third gender, and there will be equal granting or equal guarantee of all constitutional and fundamental rights to them at all walks of life. There cannot be any sort of discrimination against them. And here again, that right to live with dignity, कि आप not only आप सुरक्षित जिंदगी जी सकते हो, बट ऑल्सो कोई आपकी जिंदगी में भेदभाव नहीं कर सकते. आपको आपका जो डिग्निटी है इसमें कोई ऐसे आगे से बोल नहीं सकता कि नहीं आपका ये अधिकार नहीं है. तो you can choose who you identify as, which is your right to gender identity, and that is enough. That is first was recognized by the NALSA judgment. Then we come to another important case, which is a 2014 case. This is a Madras High Court case. Here, this is called G. Nagalakshmi versus Director General of Police. यहाँ पे बोला गया था कि कभी भी कोई specific, again state wise laws होते हैं, right? So if there isn't any specific law which says otherwise, any person has the right to choose their or stick to their own identified gender, and that has to be respected. So to give you basically to exemplify that, so if a particular police station, the home ministry of one particular state has come up with the rules ki no, we will only depend on the, or will only refer to the certification or any affidavit, then you will have to comply to that. But again, there are issues about discrimination and those questions can arise. But say none of those questions or none of those rules exist. It's absolutely no prohibitions exist. Then a person has the liberty to choose their own sexual or gender identity, and any state authority will have to uphold the person's right to choose that gender. So no one can question that. And another very important judgment that we should remember is the 2017 judgment of retired Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. Here, this was heard before the Supreme Court of India, and the Supreme Court said that sexual orientation and gender identity are all parts of our right to privacy. And right to privacy is an essential component of right to life of under Article 21, which therefore makes right to privacy a fundamental right. So therefore, our right to gender identity and the right to choose one's gender, or our right to choose whom we want to love, which is our sexual orientation, is a fundamental right. So anything that has to do with our intimate relations are protected by the law. So even that cannot be sort of, no one can interfere that in that sort of interfere in that arena of our personal life. So personal liberty includes our right to privacy, which in turn includes our right to gender identity. So these three, I think these two particular, the Nalsa judgment and the Puttaswamy judgment, which gives us the right to ultimately self-identify, is something that we should remember.
Yeah, I think that is a very good example to actually talk about, because that also talks about right to privacy, and which is very important. Whatever sexual orientation you have, which gender you identify with, it all comes under your right to privacy, and you have that right, so you cannot be discriminated against it. And then thanks for also putting forward all the other fundamental rights as human that we have under our constitution, and also emphasizing again on the right to education. So especially in school, if you're facing any discrimination because of how you identify, because of your gender identity, you have the protection from the law against it. You have the right to education, uh, irrelevance of whatever gender you identify with. So thank you so much, Yashaswini, for putting that forward. I think it's very important for the youth to also understand that whatever gender they identify with, the law has protection, the law protects them, and they can leverage that in their day-to-day life if they're facing any kind of discrimination, and there are bodies which can help them in dealing with such kind of discrimination. And as you said that you'll be sharing the links, and we also try to broadcast it to the wider network. So thank you so much for joining us today, Yashaswini. And to the audience, we will keep coming up with these kind of sessions wherein we will talk about what is there in the constitution, how law can protect us, and what are the bodies which can help us. So I think this will be very important to understand and to gather the information from, because we'll keep having experts from the Nyaya team to talk about these kind of topics which are very important, especially for the youth. So thank you so much everyone for joining, and special thanks to the Nyaya team for sharing
Thank you
their
so much.
expertise with
Thank you,
us, and
Ayushi.
to
I'd
you
like
all
to
as well.
really
Thank you so much.
appreciate your efforts in making this a safe space and facilitating these very, very important conversations that all of us should know, irrespective of whether we identify as a transgender person or not. I think even if we don't, it's all the more important for us to understand, because we should know how to, what is the right language to use, how to ensure that they are not discriminated against, and just to ensure that everyone feels included. So just for that giving that space and making sure everyone feels welcome is a very, very important work that you all are doing. And really happy that we got to, share this space with you to talk about some of the legal provisions. And I'm hoping that if there are more questions and there are more, there's more interest in any specific area, we can come in and keep these discussions alive. I will, as you said, 100% share some of the resources we have, but do let us know if we need to work on a specific area which like an area where the information is required. We would be very happy to work on that as well.
Thanks so much, Yashaswini, and especially to Naya Foundation for what all they are doing. It's very important and very helpful for the people. And all of you stay to OHOQ space, because we will keep coming with these kind of sessions and these kind of posts so that you all are aware about all the laws and protection you have.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much,
Bye. Have
everyone,
a
for
nice
coming.
weekend.
Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.